£432,000. That was the total equity of Jeremy Clarkson's brewery at the start of one financial year. 12 months later, filed and on public record, that number had become just over £3 million. Read that gap again. 7 times over in a single year. And here's what makes that number strange. Not impressive. Strange. That growth happened on the exact same farm where, by Clarkson's own admission, the crop business was guaranteed to lose money. It happened while a disease outbreak had frozen his cattle trade for months longer than anyone expected. It happened while his pub was hit twice by fraud in the space of a few weeks. Something was clearly working, and it wasn't the thing everyone assumed was working. Let's start with the year Clarkson actually had, because the brewery numbers only make sense once you see what they were sitting next to. In late July 2025, Clarkson posted that Diddley Squat had gone down with bovine TB. One of the farm's puppies had died that same morning. Under DEFRA rules, once a cow tests positive, the whole herd is locked down. No buying, no selling, until it clears. At the time, Clarkson told Times Radio he expected it to take around 8 weeks. Hold on to that number. 8 weeks. Months later, in a Sunday Times column written in early 2026, Clarkson mentioned almost in passing that the farm was still under restriction. 8 weeks had quietly turned into the better part of a year. No dramatic update video, no big reveal, just a line buried in a column about something else entirely, and most of his audience never caught it. Think about what that actually costs. A TB lockdown doesn't pause your bills. Feed, fuel, wages, land. None of that stops because DEFRA has frozen your cattle income. It just sits there, month after month, draining a business that's no longer allowed to trade the thing it was built to trade. And the cattle weren't the only problem. In that same column, Clarkson explained why he barely planted this year at all. His land agent, the man the show nicknames Cheerful Charlie, told him flatly that putting spring barley and wheat in the ground wasn't a gamble. It was a guaranteed loss. Clarkson's own words: if he grew wheat in Britain this year, with energy, labor, and tax costs where they are, he'd be finished before he started. Here's the mechanic behind that, because it's not bad luck, it's structural. A weak harvest across northern Europe should have pushed grain prices up. Instead, the rest of the world had a bumper year, the global market flooded, and prices dropped anyway, right as UK costs stayed exactly as high as ever. Low prices, high costs. That's not just Clarkson's problem. That's the trap a huge number of British arable farmers are sitting in right now. So ask the obvious question. If the crop side is a guaranteed loss and the TB restriction still hasn't lifted, why is Clarkson comfortable hosting 30,000 farming professionals on that same land for the cereals event in June 2026? He answers it himself, and there's real discomfort in how he says it. Proud to host it, he says, but a little embarrassed, because 30,000 farmers will spend the day talking about farming on a farm where not much farming is actually happening. That's not a joke. That's the owner telling you on the record that the industry's flagship event is landing on a farm that, by his own account, isn't really producing this year. A disease restriction that blew past its own timeline by months. A crop season written off before a single seed went in. A signature event hosted on land its own owner says isn't working. That's the kind of year that quietly bleeds an operation dry while nobody's watching the right numbers. And that's exactly the moment where the other business, the one nobody was talking about, was doing the opposite. While the crop side of Diddley Squat was absorbing all of that, Hawkstone Brewery, built from the same farm's barley, based nearby in Bourton-on-the-Water, filed accounts covering that exact stretch. Equity, $432,000 to just over $3 million. Current assets nearly tripled. Stock went from around $600,000 to almost $2 million. Cash in the bank jumped roughly 15-fold. Staff numbers nearly doubled, from 28 to 53. And according to a Sunday Times figure published alongside those accounts, sales climbed from £7.8 million to £21.3 million. Every one of those numbers moved in the same direction, in the same 12 months that the farm's own crop division was, by Clarkson's own admission, destined to lose money. Sit with that. The barley too cheap to sell as raw grain, the exact crop his land agent said wasn't worth planting, is the same barley behind a brand that just tripled its sales and multiplied its value nearly 7-fold. He didn't get lucky and dodge a bad year. He built a second business that takes the raw material the commodity market refuses to pay for and turns it into something people are happy to pay a premium for. Sell it as grain, and this year it's a loss by design. Turn it into beer, and the numbers do this instead. The timing makes it sharper. Hawkstone was named the fastest-growing private company in the Southwest and ranked 23rd nationally on the Sunday Times list of Britain's 100 fastest-growing companies, up from 24th the year before. That ranking landed in the exact stretch where the rest of the farm was under a disease lockdown and a crop season already written off. One part of the business was absorbing a genuine external shock. The other was accelerating straight through it. There's a detail worth flagging honestly here. Hawkstone still falls under the small company filing threshold, which means the full margin picture, exactly how much profit sits inside every pint, isn't public yet. So nobody outside the business can say precisely how much it's keeping. What is public and filed is the direction. And the direction isn't subtle. The rest of the operation had its own bruises too, and they matter, because they're what makes the brewery's number land as hard as it does. The Farmer's Dog, the pub Clarkson opened near Burford in 2024, disclosed in a September 2025 column that it had been hacked and defrauded out of £27,000. In the same piece, he described a separate attempt, customers allegedly trying to con the business out of £5,000 through fake food allergy claims. 2 hits, disclosed together, about one small business. Clarkson framed it as part of a wider pattern, noting that a pub somewhere in Britain closes almost every single day right now. The pub is still open. It absorbed both hits and kept trading. The farm shop had its own bad stretch. Storm Dara forced it shut through December 2024, and it stayed closed through January and February before reopening in March. Close to 3 months with no shop revenue at all, landing in the same window as everything else. Then there's the planning fight running quietly underneath all of it, following the same pattern, pressure, and Clarkson pushing through it rather than backing off. West Oxfordshire District Council has a long history of blocking him, including the car park attached to the farm shop. He won a temporary appeal in 2023, on condition the land be restored within 3 years. That deadline is now close. As of early July 2026, his bid to keep the car park until 2030 picked up high-level backing from the Highways Authority. The council hasn't ruled yet, but right now the momentum is with him. One more thread worth being upfront about. There are 2 companies on the public register, Diddley Squat Farm Shop Limited and Diddley Squat Farm Limited, registered not in Oxfordshire but at an address in West Yorkshire. One was dissolved in August 2025. Whether either has any real connection to Clarkson's actual operation hasn't been confirmed. It might be nothing. It might not be. Right now it's a loose end, not a headline, and loose ends get checked properly before a number goes on screen. So where does that leave things today? A TB restriction that ran far past its own estimate, and as of the most recent update, still hadn't lifted. A crop year the man himself calls a guaranteed loss before it began. A pub that took 2 separate financial hits in 1 month. A shop that lost roughly 3 months of trading to storm damage. And sitting in the middle of all of it, on the same land, under the same ownership, a brewery that turned £432,000 into £3 million, tripled its sales, and nearly doubled its staff in the same 12 months. That's not luck. That's not a famous face coasting while the business runs itself. That's someone taking the exact part of the operation that was structurally failing on the open market and rebuilding it, on the same land, from the same raw ingredient, into the fastest growing part of the business. The wheat lost money because it was sold as wheat, into a market that had already collapsed. The same wheat, turned into beer, did the opposite. Nothing here is finished. The next set of accounts hasn't landed. The council hasn't ruled. There's been no public update on the TB status since that early 2026 column, so nobody outside the farm actually knows if it's still running, and that Yorkshire-registered company is still an open question with no answer either way. So tell me what to check next. The car park ruling, the next Hawkstone filing, or that Yorkshire company nobody's explained yet. Drop it below, and I'll go dig through the filing myself. Thank you for watching, and please subscribe my channel.